Okay, so let's continue our discussion here of working with people. And the next thing I want to talk about is communication. More specifically, communication channels. What are communication channels? Let's take a quick example here. Let's assume that we have three people, Mary, John, and Mike. I want you to imagine them standing in a triangle. Mary is able to talk to John, and likewise, John is able to talk to Mary. So that's one communication channel right there. Mary is also able to talk to Mike, and Mike is able to talk to Mary. That's another communication channel. Mike and John are able to talk to each other. That's a third communication channel. So between the three people here, we have three communication channels. As the number of people increases, your communication channels increase. And an easy way to calculate it, because you're going to need to know how to do it as a project manager, is to use this formula over here. So N in this formula stands for the number of people. So let's take an example. Let's say that the number of people involved is 5, and I want to calculate the number of communication channels involved between 5 people. So we start with what's in the parentheses or the brackets here. 5 minus 1 is 4. 4 multiplied by 5, which is N, is 20. 20 divided by 2 is 10. 10 communication channels. Between 5 people, there are 10 communication channels between them. Okay, so we've identified our communication channels, I apologize. What we need to do next is put together a communication management plan. So in the communication management plan, very similar to a risk register, all you're doing is listing down what the communications are. You're going to identify who your audiences are. So for example, I have team members, I have senior leadership, what information each audience requires. So my team members will need a status update. Okay, in what format? In the format of a meeting. Virtual or in person? Let's say virtual. So what's the channel? How often? Weekly. Who's going to be doing that communication? The project manager. You see what I did there is similar to a risk register. I've just taken the communication and I broke it down into how it needs to happen, who it needs to go to, how often it needs to go to them, who's going to be delivering it, through what methods, etc. Same with senior leadership. They need progress updates through the format of a report, sent by email, bi-monthly, by the project manager. Identifying your communication management plan from the beginning makes things very, very clear and gives people a good idea of what they can expect. So senior leadership can expect that bi-monthly, they're going to get a progress update in the form of an emailed report. Really, really useful. And the last thing I want to talk about here is stakeholder engagement, which is a key part of working with people and will really rely on your communication skills. Don't forget that in your communication management plan, you need to outline how you're going to communicate with your stakeholders. Customer or client is a line item in your communication management plan. How often are you going to keep them informed? When you're engaging stakeholders, you're working with them. But how do you know to what extent to work with them? What we can use is a stakeholder engagement matrix here. On the y-axis, I have influence or power. On the x-axis, I have interest. Detailing this a little more, what I'm specifically referring to is the amount of power or influence that this stakeholder has. The amount of interest that this stakeholder has on the project, in the project. So, for example, a stakeholder who has a lot of power, they have a lot of power in the organization. Let's say they are the chief executive officer, and they have a lot of interest in this specific project. I'm going to monitor them closely. I'm going to always keep them updated. I'm going to always make sure that they're happy. Monitor them closely, be on top of them, right? Check in on them, give them updates and reports, make sure that their needs are met all the time and they are always happy. Someone who has high power but low interest on the project, I'm just going to make sure that their needs are met. On the opposite end, someone who has high interest but low power, I'm just going to keep them informed, right? I don't need to really go above and beyond with their needs here. They're just interested, but they don't have high power. So I'm just going to keep them informed. And finally, someone who has low power and low interest, I'm just going to be aware of them. I'm just going to be aware of them, maybe include them on some communication, but just be aware of them. So you need to know as a project manager how to engage with your stakeholders, how to communicate with them, and understand how they're categorized. Not all stakeholders are the same, right? You need to understand who they are and what their interests are and what positions of power do they hold, right? Okay, we'll stop it here and we'll see you on the next one.